Pringle,
Present.
Mr. Mackey,
Present.
Mr. Barfoot,
Present.
Mr. Burley,
Present.
Mr. McQueen,
Present.
Warden Halliday,
Present.
Ms. Patterson, Mr. Hicks,
Here.
Ms. Clumpus, Mr. Greenfield. Mr. Body sends his regrets. Mr. O'Leary,
Present.
Ms. Wright, Ms. Fosbrook,
Present.
Mr. Woodbury,
Present.
Mr. McKean sends his regrets. Ms. Ardell,
In attendance.
Mr. Eccles,
Counted for.
Mr. Bell sends his regrets. Thank you.
Well, thank you. If anybody has a declaration of pecuniary interest, they can declare it now or later as the occasion may arise. We begin by business arising, and we have that the additional official plan correspondence be received. Yes, clerk will clue us in on how we're going to handle this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to give council an update on the last meeting and how we proceeded to business arising. So at the September 27th meeting, Committee of the Whole meeting, report PDR CW 1918 regarding the recolor gray official plan was presented to Committee of the Whole. At that time, an amended motion was passed by the committee. At the end of Committee of the Whole, 2 notices of motion were presented regarding amendments to the official plan. Under the county's procedural bylaw, notices of motion are placed on the following Committee of the Whole agenda for consideration. However, since the minutes from the September 27th Committee of the Whole meeting were going to be considered today at the County Council session, the notices of motion would not be heard until after the minutes have been dealt with by council. In addition, planning staff have received several other pieces of correspondence related to the official plan since the report was presented on the 27th. In order to be accountable and transparent and provide council with all of the information received regarding this item so it can make an informed decision, business arising was added to the council agenda. This includes both the public correspondence received as well as the requested amendments from Councillors Burley and Fosbrook received under notice of motion at the September 27th Committee of the Whole meeting. It was thought that this was the most effective way to provide council with all of the information received to date as correspondence. When we get to those minutes, the Committee of the Whole minutes, if a member of council wishes to make an amendment to the resolution regarding the official plan, that resolution will need to be pulled from the Committee of the Whole minutes once they are on the floor to be voted on separately. If the motion to pull the resolution is successful, the resolution will stand on its own, will be open for discussion and amendments as council deems fit. So I just wanted to provide that as a bit of a process.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions on what Heather's brought forward to us? Seeing none, then we'll go to the adoption of the minutes.
We need to go to business arising now and have that resolution, and Randy will speak to all of the correspondence.
Oh, Randy's
here.
going to speak to that.
Yes.
Very good. Thanks for that. Randy will, so is that really a motion then?
Yes, it is.
Okay. A motion on the floor that the additional official plan correspondence be received. Put that on the floor. Councillor Pringle, Councillor Mackey. It is now on the floor for discussion, and Randy is going to bring us up to date on what's happening in that area. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Warden, and good morning, Council. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for the comments that have been submitted on the latest draft of the OP. Without the community's feedback on the official plan throughout the recolor gray process, we would have a plan that looks a lot different than what it does today. It's because of the community's involvement and community input throughout this process is why we're at a stage where we are at today and why the plan looks like it is and reads the way it does today. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to go through the correspondence. County staff have reviewed all the correspondence, and although there are a lot of good comments and suggestions, at this stage we are not recommending any further revisions to the official plan. County staff believe the comments raised have either been addressed to either the latest draft of the official plan, or in some cases, we're just not recommending changes as a result of the comments. It should be noted, the province has been involved throughout the recolor grade process, and they have not raised any issues with respect to the proposed policies not being consistent with the provincial policy statement. We are aware that there is one matter that the province has raised that we feel is somewhat outstanding in the new official plan, and that's with respect to the bedrock and shale resources. The province would like us to include policies that would protect these resources. County staff are recommending that this be considered through a separate official plan amendment so that further consultation can occur with local municipalities, agencies, and the public. But beyond the bedrock and shale resource policies, we're not aware of any outstanding matters between the latest revised version of the official plan and the province's comments, but that time will tell that. And ultimately, the province has the final say, and if there's any modifications, further modifications, the province can consider those prior to their final approval. If council wishes to discuss any of the correspondence or would like to suggest any further revisions based on the correspondence, I'm more than happy to discuss this further. We will be sending all the correspondence, including the most recent correspondence, to the province as part of the package that goes to the province for their consideration. If the province feels that further revisions are required, they will make those revisions as part of their approval process. As mentioned at the previous meeting, the official plan, it's a living document and can always be amended. Following the province's approval, if we find that a policy in the new OP is not working, if we've missed something, we can address this through a future housekeeping amendment, which for a official plan of this size and magnitude, it's standard practice that we would probably have a housekeeping amendment following even the province's approval of the new OP. I'm happy to take any questions on any of the correspondence if council wants to discuss it further, and we can discuss that if council sees fit. So I'm open to any of that discussion.
I thank you, Randy. Anybody want to ask Randy any questions on this before we discuss this? Councillor Fosberg?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Heather, for your assistance in navigating this situation. One of my primary concerns, Randy, is that I believe that there are points in the official plan that are not consistent with the Planning Act nor the provincial policy statement. So in the province reviewing this, who is accountable for ensuring that our official plan complies with all applicable legislation? Is it the province or us?
Through you, Mr. Warden, I would say it's both the county's and the province's responsibility to ensure that the new official plan that's being recommended for adoption to this council, as well as what we're recommending the province to approve, it's I think both the county and the province's responsibility. Ultimately, the province will be the approval authority with respect to this. They will ensure that if there are any policies that they feel that are not consistent with the PPS or comply with provincial legislation, they will make modifications as such. We hope that they will provide us with those draft modifications before they pass those. County staff, as I mentioned, we've reviewed all the correspondence. We feel that most of those matters have either been addressed or we're just not recommending that they be changed as a result of the comments. So, you know, for example, with respect to some of your comments regarding official plan regarding the AGRID operations and consistency with provincial policy statement. Based on the latest revisions that were made to the official plan, we actually added in wording just to clarify that any studies that are submitted to support aggregate operations must be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and they must address county official plan policies and local official plan policies. And that came about as a result of some of your previous correspondence, and we greatly appreciate that because it adds further clarity. It's always been an expectation that those be addressed through those studies, but it just adds clarity in terms of making sure that those are requirements that we expect when they're submitting those studies. So there's things that we feel that we've made some positive changes as a result of the comments to date. But time will tell. Again, the province can make some further modifications if they feel otherwise, if they feel it's still not consistent with the PPS or doesn't comply with provincial legislation.
Thank you for
Thank you
that.
for that. If I may, Mr. Warden? One
Yes,
more?
one short, please.
One more. I've come to understand that the province's process includes an EBR posting for comments. Never really knowing when that might come to light, will the county staff be notified, and will we make efforts to notify the public when that 30-day window is open?
Through you, Mr. Warden, and great question. And what we are going to ask the province if they can let us know if once that EBR posting
Going
is
to
available.
ask if?
We're going to ask them to
I'll
please
ask
notify
too.
us. Sure.
Okay.
And once we receive that notification, we can post on our website, letting people know that that EBR posting is now available, and can, if there's any further comments that people wish to provide, they can do so through that EBR. And we could even do a MailChimp update to our large distribution email list to let people aware of that opportunity as well. I can have a discussion with Tyler in terms of making sure that they let us know that date, so that we can make people aware of that opportunity once it becomes available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, anyone is able to subscribe to the EBR to get automatic updates in your email based on keywords. So if you were interested, for example, in seeing anything that ever came forward to the registry with Hanover in it, for example, you can simply subscribe to that, and those things will be emailed, an alert will be emailed to you directly. So that is, I mean, I subscribe to Gray and a whole other host of things, so that's one other thing you can do.
Yes?
Thank you. And I appreciate that that function is available, but I just wanted to be clear that I think we should be pushing this out to our constituents overtly. Here you go. You should know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's been promised, so
Yeah.
let's move on. Any other discussions? Seeing none, all in favor of this motion on the floor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Randy, for the good update. Okay, I guess now we're going to go to the adoption of the minutes.
County council minutes.
County Council minutes dated September the 27th, 2018, and that the resolutions contained therein be adopted as presented. Put that on the floor. Councillor Burley, seconder, Councillor Eccles. Discussion on that. Yes, Councillor Burley.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My notice of motion concerning motion 5.4.3,
Right.
do I ask to have it pulled? I'm not sure of the protocol.
Yes, clerk will answer that, yeah.
So that resolution is contained within the committee of the whole minutes, so those are the next on the agenda.
Okay, that answers that question. You know what to do then. Any other discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, call the motion. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, the next one is that the minutes of the committee of whole meeting dated September the 27th, 2018, and the resolutions contained therein be adopted as presented. Put that on the floor. Councillor Hicks, Councillor Greenfield. Any discussion? Councillor Burley.
I'm requesting to have motion 5.4.3 pulled to be voted on separately.
Thank you.
So that would be, so for council members, that is Resolution CW 226-18, page 41 of your council package.
I'll second that, Mr. Warden.
Pardon?
I'll second that.
Yes, thank you. The motion is, all in favor of, no, we're just pulling this, right? When are we going to discuss that
So-
section?
If this resolution is successful, then it can go on the floor after the minutes have been approved.
Okay, let's take that. So, okay, all in favor of the motion by Councillor Burley and McQueen? Motion is carried. Okay, so now we'll go back to approving everything except that, except that section and that the motion by Councillor Hicks and Councillor Greenfield as amended. Okay. All right, so that motion is there. Yes,
So I believe we're yet to vote on the main motion as amended.
that's right.
So when we receive presentations, as we did at the Committee of the Whole, that were not on the agenda,
Right?
and when those presentations are added to the website, should we not be updating the agenda to reflect that there were additions to the agenda?
I'll let the clerk answer that.
It's a supporting document to the agenda. The report was on the agenda, and the agenda will stand. What the presentation is just a supporting document that provides a brief overview of what was contained within the report. So there's nothing new in the presentation. It is just, as I said, a supporting document for ease of reference for the report.
Well, I appreciate your assessment. I disagree, but thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions on that? So we'll call the motion that the resolution for the committee of the whole be passed. All in favor? That's carried. Madam Clerk, do you have any comments that you? on that? No.
The Committee of the Whole minutes have been passed as amended.
Right.
And the one resolution pulled was 222618.
Right.
So that is up on the.
Up on the screen now. And
Yes.
so, how do you want to handle that, Madam Clerk? Do you want Councillor Burley to add his notice of motion, or how do you want to do that?
So it needs to be moved and seconded first to put it on the floor, and if
Okay.
there are any amendments, then those will come after it's been put on the floor.
Okay, good. So we'll put that on the floor. Councillor Burley, Councillor Mackey, let's put that on the floor. Now, open for discussion. Anybody want to comment on that? Yes, Councillor McQueen, then Councillor Greenfield.
So I guess for clarity, this would mean on 100 acres, which is 40, that they're proposing that there could be 3 lots and the retained, is that right? Is that what the mover and seconder are talking about? So this was in place back, I think, prior to amalgamation in the original official plan. Maybe I'm looking at Scott, or Randy, maybe. So this is, the county did have this at one time.
Got a question? Maybe the head planner can comment.
Previous warden, that's correct. So in the original official plan that was adopted in '97, approved eventually by the board in 2000, the maximum lot density for rural designation was 4 lots per 100. So this would essentially be returning to what it originally was. That was revised as part of what we call official plan amendment number 80, which was the 5-year review. That was adopted by Council in 2009, approved by the province in 2011, and approved by the board in 2012. And that reduced it by essentially 1 lot. Under the current official plan, it's 2 plus the retained. This would essentially be going back to what was originally in the official plan, which would be 3 plus retained, which essentially is 4 lots per 100.
Yes, go ahead.
So then, to take the frontage issue through our current official plan, by going this, we would still have frontage through the minimum size of a rural lot would still work? So I think it's 100 meters, is that correct? Used to be anyway. So the frontage of a rural lot would be 100 meters. So generally, you could have 3 plus the retained would equal enough frontage for the retained along with the 3 lots. Is that still, would be maintained under the other verbiage of how to create a rural lot?
Randy, do you have an answer to the 100 meters?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, basically the official plan is silent on the frontage. We defer to local zoning bylaws for the minimum frontage for a rural lot. So that can vary by municipality. We do have a, what do we call it, it's a frontage depth ratio of a 1 to 3. So there is some policies in the official plan, but essentially we defer to local municipality zoning bylaws to determine the minimum lot frontage for a rural lot.
Thank you. Councillor Greenfield, then Councillor Burley, then Councillor Barfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you to Randy, actually a couple of questions. First of all, do we locally in Grey County, in your opinion, have the safeguards in place that if indeed we do pass this motion, do we have safeguards in place that will protect the right to farm attitude? And I guess the second question is, what's the province going to say about this? What is their opinion?
Director of Planning will now comment.
Come up here, just answer those questions. Great questions. So under the rural lot designation and rural designation, we have a bunch of development criteria that any lot would have to address before consideration. So things like minimum distance separation and other aspects would still have to be addressed regardless of whether or not the increased lot density is going to be considered. So if we're still at 2+ retained or 3+ retained, any lot creation within the rural area has to meet that development criteria, which includes a minimum distance separation. So there are safeguards in place in terms of trying to prevent some compatibility issues between that rural lot creation and existing farms. In saying that, you know, and staff continue to not recommend this increase for some of those reasons. We've seen conflicts with agriculture operations, with rural lots, with proposed aggregate operations and other things. We totally understand in terms of wanting to increase the rural lot density, however, because we have put in other levels of safeguards in terms of natural environment policies. So we have included in this new official plan core areas and other features that at the end of the day may prevent further lot creation. So the amount of opportunities for rural lot creation is limited based on some of the policies. So in some cases, you may still not be able to get the maximum lot density even as it stands today under official plan for other reasons, for other policies that are in the official plan. Although staff are not recommending, it's up to council in terms of how they wish to proceed. With respect to your question in regards to whether or not the province would consider this, so under the provincial policy statement, there's wording in the PPS for rural areas that it allows for limited residential development in the rural area. That's not defined in terms of what's limited. That provides some flexibility for municipalities to determine, okay, what is our limited residential development? Is it 2+ retained or is it 3+ retained? So I think there's enough flexibility in the PPS to consider that. At the same time, I can't predict in terms of what the province will decide. They could decide to not support this and modify that out, but time will only tell with respect to that, and I can't predict what the province will decide on this, if this were to change.
Does that answer your question, Councillor? Okay, the Councillor Burley and then Councillor Barfoot, you had a comment? Councillor Burley.
Randy, before you sit down,
Yeah.
every lower tier municipality has the option to put in more stringent policies. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, and I know that was a concern that was raised at the last committee of the whole meeting in terms of if the official plan allows for a higher lot density and local municipalities want to be more restrictive, people always point to the county official plan to say, hey, the county OP allows for it, why don't you allow for it? We have municipalities in their local official plans are already more restrictive than the county official plan today. So there's some municipalities that only allow one lot, one additional lot in the rural area. And in those cases, we haven't seen a conflict or heard of anyone complaining or indicating that, well, the county allows for it, why don't you? Municipalities can always be more restrictive in their official plans than what's in place in the county official plan. they can't be in conflict with. So in conflict with, it would be allowing for more permissive policies in some cases. So with respect to that, I know there was a suggestion to revise the motion to include a provision, just to be clear, that municipalities can be more restrictive, because I know that was a concern. I think Councillor McKean raised that as a concern in terms of not being clear in terms of that this would prevent municipalities to be more restrictive. So what I think is suggested in the amended motion that in Councillor Burley's correspondence was to include a provision in the official plan to indicate that that local municipalities can in fact be more restrictive when it comes to rural lot density than the current county official plan. So that is part of that motion. If council were to entertain increasing the lot density, what we would recommend is adding in that provision or that clause, just so that everyone's clear that local municipalities can be more restrictive in their official plans when it comes to rural lot density.
That's a good answer, yes. Councillor Barfoot, you had comments?
I was going to say exactly what Randy did.
That's great.
Just to be clear, though, that we're dealing with the rural on this
Rural
and not
zoning, yeah.
agriculture, and I think that needs to be clear moving forward. And I think as to what Councilor McQueen had said before, and we previously had this, what we're trying to encourage is to, in the rural area, to maybe create some small farms for people to be able to try farming if they like, and then, you know, upsize if they want at a later date. So as I think all the pertinent questions have been answered on this one, but I just wanted to clarify to make sure we're all cognizant of the fact that, you know, we don't want to have rural and urban conflicts when people buy lots. But, you know, I think by having it, the lower tiers can be more restrictive satisfies the need for all of this, so.
Right, and, well, thanks for that, and Randy, you've got that covered. You're not saying what size the lots would be or anything like that?
No, in the official plan, the way it's currently worded in the policies, it would require a 0.8 hectare lot minimum size.
Right.
Which is essentially 2 acres. But beyond that,
Right.
yeah, you can create upwards from 2 acres to whatever size.
Okay, so the flexibility is at the municipal level, the lower tier municipal level? Okay, any other questions? Councillor Barfoot?
We're just following up, so I'm just on, like, this is the amendment we're bringing forward. I guess I'm just trying to be clear.
Yep, the clerk can speak to that, yeah.
So right now, it's just the motion that was in the Committee of the Whole minutes from the last Committee of the Whole meeting. If someone is wanting to make an amendment to that, they need to put the amendment on the floor.
I would move the amendment then to put on the floor, of which we have just discussed here then, which is listed then below the current motion that's there.
Right, that's Councillor Burley's, Councillor Burley, you're seconding that? Okay, so the amendment then is on the screen, and that's essentially what Councillor Burley brought forward in his notice of motion. So we're putting that on the floor for discussion. Any further discussion on, yes, Councillor Ardell?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I will not be voting in favor of this. In the town of the Blue Mountains, I believe that we should be keeping status quo and mirroring Grey County. When we start chopping up lands in the Blue Mountain again to make smaller farm lots in the rural areas, which we still have a lot of rural areas and not necessarily agricultural, we are going to be creating more residential estate lots. And it's going to increase the land values in our town even further. There will be no attainable housing in our community at all. You can't afford to live there as it is. $768,000 for a home and upwards. We cannot support the young people moving back to our area or even having jobs because of creating more lots. I am not in favor of this.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Warden. Well, just in response to Councillor Ardell, as you stated, Randy, this allows, say, Blue Mountains to be more restrictive. So a blanket policy will not limit you to do that, in my understanding. You would
Right.
still be allowed to be more restrictive.
That's,
Through
you want
Mr.
to comment?
Warden, yeah, that's correct. And
Verifying
that's,
that.
that's why if council is wanting to increase the lot density, we recommend adding that provision, just to be clear that
Right.
local municipalities can in fact be more restrictive, even though they have that ability today.
That's included in there. Yes, Councillor Pringle.
Maybe just a bit of an explanation. Originally, when we were trying to bring this back and doing the background, we had thought that it would be Chatsworth, Township of Chatsworth, and Georgian Bluffs that would maybe want to do this specific. Staff at the county level suggested it was better to be a blanket statement policy, and then that allows any lower tier to be as restrictive as they decide. And that is exactly what this would be.
Right, and that's a good
Yeah.
reconsideration on the ideas.
Through you, Mr. Warden, just to clarify that, so, you know, if council wishes to increase the rural lot density, what we would recommend is that be a consistent policy across the county, with the understanding, and that's why we're suggesting adding the wording in the official plan, that municipalities can be more restrictive. To pick and choose, I guess, municipalities in terms of having rural lot density for one or two municipalities versus the remainder of the municipalities, we didn't recommend that approach. We recommend that if council chooses to increase the rural lot density, that be permitted across the board if municipalities wish to do that, but that municipalities can be more restrictive if they don't want to increase the rural lot density.
Right, and any need lower tier, official plans have to be approved by the county anyhow, so you will
correct.
have the input in the overview. Councillor Ardell and then Councillor Mackey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I fully understand that. I just feel that all of the municipalities should stay status quo. I do not believe that we should be moving forward in this direction. I just do not feel that this is right for Grey County, and I won't go on any further because I just don't feel it is prudent for our county.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Mackey, you had some comments, and then Councillor McQueen.
Thanks, Warden. For the Township of Chatsworth being a rural municipality, you know, we have about a third of our land mass is agricultural, another third is aggregate, so we're left with 1/3 that's rural. So we're just looking for the flexibility to be able to add one additional lot in some of the rural designations where it makes sense. Not to interfere with the farming situations at all, but we've got a lot of rough property that it makes complete sense to have one additional lot on 100 acres. So
And
I'm certainly
Chatsworth-
in support of the flexibility that this allows the lower tier municipalities.
Right, and
Thank you.
Chatsworth doesn't have its own official plan, it follows the county, so that gives you the flexibility, and others as well. Councillor McQueen, you had a comment?
Well, thank you, Mr. Warden, and certainly a few comments here with regards to, I know the comments from Blue Mountains, I understand certainly your perspective on that, but I know Blue Mountains is the only municipality in the county of Grey that can make specialty crop smaller lots. I don't think there's any other official plan that can make smaller lots for specialty crop farms. I know provisions in the Blue Mountains plan allows that, I think through MOFRA, that through designation, you can have smaller farms, but nowhere else in Grey County can we do that. So I think there's a reason there. I got other points, but maybe Randy has a comment to that.
Yeah, just for this, so there are special agriculture designation lands in Meaford as well. So we have both Meaford and Blue Mountains that, in those areas, you can have a smaller lot size. And it's based on the fact that you can have an apple orchard and other, in some cases now we're seeing wineries as well, on a smaller lot size and still make a go of it from a financial perspective and from a farm business plan perspective. So that's why a smaller lot size is permitted within those special agricultural designations. We are unique in that there's not too many counties in the province that have a split designation between agricultural designated lands and rural designated lands. Most official plans throughout the province have just agricultural designated and settlement area. We have the added bonus of having rural designated lands. This gives us some flexibility in terms of looking for other opportunities that may otherwise not be permitted in the agricultural areas. So that is a bonus that we have here in Grey County, that we have that split designation as well, and that's throughout the county.
So to continue on that, Mr. Warden, so then I think it goes back to what Councillor Barfoot was saying, that it gives that extra flexibility there. I guess the other part is, I know in Grey Highlands, we were here too, Mr. Pringle. Since amalgamation, we've built probably between 30 and 50 homes a year, and majority of those have been on rural lots. And so even since amalgamation, there could be 600 homes that have been built in Grey Highlands just on those rural lots. And certainly the inventory is getting down, because you can see it as the price goes up. I think for the ability to do this, I will certainly support this in the sense that we know from our school situation, our arenas, community centers, and the cost of housing. I mean, I think this gives an opportunity for young people here to stay in Grey County just by having that added flexibility. I mean, we went through this whole process with our official plan. We heard comments about different options or different ideas of creating opportunities for young people, whether that's that perspective or whatever. Things have changed. The millennials no longer want to be in urban centers. They want to be out where they're not strapped to a $1 million mortgage. So I think this gives that flexibility. We've gone down to 2. This opportunity goes to 3. I think it gives that flexibility to create some real opportunities here in Grey County.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Greenfield?
Thanks again, Mr. Warden, and just one more question for Randy, if I may. Okay, but if the county agrees with this recommendation, and if some of the lower tier municipalities do not increase the number of lots, and it sounds like the province is a little vague on this. Are we setting ourselves up, are we setting the municipalities in the county up for a great increase in local planning appeals? Because I can see arguments both ways here, and I don't want to start a pandemic of these appeals coming forward.
Yes, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Warden. It's a difficult question to answer. Based on past precedents in terms of rural lots that have been created, we haven't seen a lot of appeals in the past on those. And I think that's a result of, the development criteria that still has to be addressed. It's not a given. It's not a given that you would be permitted 3, in this case 3 plus the retained. That's the maximum lot density. What we've often find is that when you go through the development criteria, when you look at things like minimum distance separation, our other natural environment policies and other things, you often can't get to your maximum. And so with that, I think that's helped to address some of the concerns that's limited the amount of appeals that we've seen historically. I can probably count on one hand in terms of the appeals that local municipalities have received on rural lots. So I don't anticipate that if we increase the density, that there would be more appeals just given the current development criteria in the rural designation.
Thanks for the feedback. So I think we've had a good fulsome discussion on that. Yes, Councillor Fosbrook, Councillor Hicks, then. Councillor Fosbrook first, then Councillor Hicks. Sorry, I caught it first.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So at the beginning of your comments, Randy, you stated that staff don't recommend this. Could you just revisit, because I'm a little unclear on what your position is?
Yeah, so at the previous meeting, county staff recommended to not increase the rural lot density. I think there was also a request to look at adding in rural plans of subdivision, so we did not recommend or support that as well. And it's based on, some of the reasons are primarily to avoid conflicts between residential uses and agricultural uses, to preserve lands for farming and resource use, because our rural areas are meant for that. And to help focus the majority of our new growth in our settlement areas. And that's the direction from the provincial policy statement, is that we need to direct majority of our growth to our fully serviced settlement areas where we have facilities and services to support our residents. So that's some of the reasons in terms of why we're not recommending support of increasing the rural lot density. In saying that, as I mentioned, we have increased and in some cases limited the amount of rural lots that could be created, because we've introduced things like agri-resource area as part of the last official plan update. And with that, that prevents lot creation, non-farm lot creation within the aggregate resource areas. Same with core areas. So when you start adding up layers, there's less and less opportunities for to maximize even the current lot density in the rural areas. And for good reason, because those are, again, our rural areas are meant to protect and to try and balance that there's a need for growth in our rural areas, at the same time protecting our natural environment, protecting our resources. And it's all about balance. And that's why we've recommended not to increase it. But we just make recommendations and council makes the decisions. And that's the beauty about our democratic process. And so with that, that's why we're not recommending, but there are other reasons why council may choose to increase beyond.
Thanks for
what
that,
we
Randy.
currently-
And Councillor Hicks, you had a question to Randy, or?
Mr. Warden, I'm persuaded by both sides. I really want to be I voted against this the last time, by the way, and I'm not hearing much new in the arguments, because the discussion with respect to lower tier municipalities being permitted to be more restrictive, that was, I think, was debated, and I asked the question specifically around that. So I don't hear much new on that, and at the last session, we voted it down. I still am somewhat persuaded, because I hear what you're saying. My question really is around, well, first of all, a general principle in the OP is that we want to direct settlement towards the primary settlement areas. And I'm gathering that this fits with that. So I struggle with us saying that we want to direct settlement in primary settlement areas, and yet we are looking to increase the lots. My question for you, Randy, is, on this frontage to depth ratio, how likely is it that you will be able to have 4 lots, given that issue with respect to the frontage to depth ratio?
It's a great question.
The 3-to-1 ratio.
And that's another one of those development criteria that, in my opinion, I think limits the ability in some cases to not go to your maximum. As I mentioned, it's a maximum lot density. It's not a given. And so one of the criteria being the lot to depth ratio could limit one's ability to create further lots on your original lot concession. So it all depends, and it all boils down to, that's why we recommend early consultation and consultation often. Before you submit an application, come chat with us. Because it varies, and it could be different in each case. And if you have an original lot concession, it's all rural, there's no natural environment features on it, some of the neighboring barns and facilities are separated from a distance perspective, you probably could get your maximum. And there are still pieces and lands out there that meet that. There's less and less in terms of having an original lot concession that's completely intact that doesn't have some of those features identified on it. So with that, we've seen, because there's those added layers, so to speak, there's less opportunities to go to the maximum lot density. But there may be the odd opportunity where you could get, say, 3 plus the retained. So I don't know, in terms of a quantity, I can't answer that in terms of, we'd have to do some further analysis. But what we're seeing in practice is that there's less opportunity to even go to the maximum density that we have in our official plan today.
So if I might...
Okay. Do you want a further comment?
Well, I guess, just to follow up on this, to make it abundantly clear, that might be an argument in favor of voting for the amended, to allow a greater amount, because what I'm hearing is that with this depth to frontage ratio, the likelihood is not
Yeah.
immense.
It's one of the...
Some will make it through. but
Some
not a
will,
lot.
some will, some won't. And like I said, we're finding that with development criteria today, even under the maximum lot density as it stands right now in our official plan, in most cases, you can't achieve your maximum lot density. So, but there will be the odd case where you would be permitted it. It's not across the board, that's for sure.
Thanks for that. And we got a question from Councillor Barfoot once again, and then an initial question from Councillor Eccles.
And I think fairness, that was a good discussion. I hope that clarifies that. I think going back to the motion that was presented the last meeting versus this one, certainly the difference is the last clause was not in the original motion for the, so that the lower tier can be more restrictive. That's really the only difference to the original motion, but that was a good explanation on the, you know, the string 100 versus the other, so.
All right, that's good. Now, Councillor Eccles, you can have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Supply and demand is the biggest driver, I believe, in a free market system. And the supply of rural lots at the present moment is getting down extremely limited. From the 1970s and the 80s when, was it 10, 12 rural lots that you could sever off 100 acres by the past council of Grey County that had a provincial statement put in place just to address that. And we saw that, you know, rural lots were affordable. One of the biggest things that I've heard over the past 6-8 months, and Ms. Shaw may jump in on this, is housing, the affordability of attainable housing. I don't care whether you're trying to buy a lot in the town of the Blue Mountains down at the foot of the village for $400,000. I'm not sure that a lot of that, you know, certainly not as a state lot, is affordable, or a lot of $250,000 at Ravenna isn't affordable, but there just isn't enough lots out there. So for an affordability, for a housing perspective in our rural areas, and one of the things in protecting our agricultural land, and I can think of 3 right off the top of my head, just outside on Highway 6, agriculture, the farms aren't there. Sorry, the farms are, but the farmhouse isn't there. In the last 2 years, farm operations, they don't want to be landlords. They can't get the house severed, so they just tear it down. Now rural Ontario, and if we're pushing everybody into urban areas, the rural area is becoming unsustainable. If we don't have people living on those roads, if we don't have houses there, as Councillor McQueen said, well, I guess we'll close down Holland School. What's the other one? Just outside of Desborough? Sullivan? There's another one. There's a few other ones. Maybe the one in Holstein. Those schools, you've got no rural kids that are coming to the school. I guess it'll certainly help the environment because we won't need to worry about school buses. So we don't need to worry about that. But getting back to that, is that what we want to do for rural Ontario? Is destroy the ability for people to live out there and be able to afford to replace a bridge. We've got nobody on the road. I guess we don't need to bother replacing the bridge. And we're starting to see that in a number of areas. To be able to support that infrastructure, to be able to support rural Ontario, to be able to support even our tourism, that there's people living there, you know, you've got to come to that. One of the biggest factors in this, I would like to see 2 or 3 rural lots on every road in West Grey. Because right now I can take you to 4 different spots. We haven't got anything there for 2.5 miles on a different side road. And I spend an inordinate amount of time dealing with people from as far away as Port Elgin that come and make that their landfill because they just dump it off because there's nobody living there. So that's a good place just to dump. If there was a house on that road, they wouldn't do it. So to protect our rural environment, we need people living in the rural area. And let's make some lots so that they're affordable, so that we can keep rural Ontario vibrant. Agricultural land is well protected, but we need the protection of some people living out there to protect our rural fabric. No question, just a statement. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you for making that statement. Well said. Any other things? So, no further discussion. We'll call the vote on the amendment. All in favor of this motion? Opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, so now we'll go back. Do we go back?
We're done
This is
now.
it. That's a done deal. Okay? All right, thank you very much for that. It was a good discussion. Next is reports. And the first report is that the Board of Health minutes dated August the 24th, 2018, and the board report dated September the 28th, 2018, be received for information. Put that on the floor. Councillor Barfoot, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? Dr. Ayres is here this morning.
Thank you,
Want to
Mr.
give us a
Warden.
brief overview?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, Council. The highlights of these two meetings are two major items. The first one is the development of a platform or a list of priority for platforms for local election based on our firm belief in the positive impact local government can have on the health of their community. The Health Unit developed a list of priority areas and has been encouraging the candidates of local election to consider the following priority as an issue. And the list includes topping the list, the opioid emergency, tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis use, mental health, dental care for lower income adults, income security, and at the end, built environment, and most importantly, transportation. The second item is related to cannabis regulation, cannabis enforcement. Last week, the province has identified the Smoke-Free Ontario Act as a vehicle for enforcement of cannabis use. Basically, with regard to where it is permitted, cannabis enforcement will parallel tobacco enforcement. The details of public health rule have not been released yet. Our staff are going to be going to training related to the enforcement, and further update will come in next meetings. If you have any questions about these two items or the rest of the agenda or the minutes from the two meetings, I'll be more than happy to address them.
Any questions, Dr. Ayres, today? Yeah, Councillor Eccles.
I think it was motion 7.5, that the Board of Health, Gabriel's Health Unit, express support for the Federal Universal Health School Food Program, as called for by Senator Eglinton. Am I reading into that right, Dr. Ayres, that we want all of the school boards to have a fully supported nutritional program in the schools?
Correct. And that would include training about healthy food preparation, ability to build a culture around the importance of healthy diets from the roots up.
So it is about education on healthy diets. It's not about having that food program. Basically, that the students are coming and will be expected to have their breakfast and lunches supplied for them at school?
Correct. It is about education.
Okay, then, fine, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, it's education. Okay. Yes, Councillor Fosbrook?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The minutes from August 24th reflect that there was an amendment to the agenda, but it's unclear what that was.
Perhaps the chair of that board may know. I think it was. I think it was an addition, but the one we received was in red, so I don't know whether.
I can look into it and send an email directly if you wish.
Thank you. And so the other question for the good doctor is the role that public health and the Ministry of Health plays in shaping and commenting on our official plan. It seems to be a little unclear. I've learned some new terminology that the Ministry of Health is not a municipal partner as defined to comment on the official plan. And I'm concerned that there's a gap there when you talk about your priorities and soliciting municipal candidates. Has public health, will the Ministry of Health, will somebody within the health umbrella be commenting on our official plan that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of this. I wouldn't be in control of this. The list of priority we developed is mainly from public health point of view, with the help of other health units in Ontario and Public Health Ontario. It's a scientific approach to health. It's health in all policy. And if you'd allow me to elaborate a bit, after the election campaign started, I received a couple emails related to how many physicians are there in the area, how many patients we have, and it seems the understanding that we can influence health through healthcare. That is true, but the most impact would come from health in all policy. Any policy that we have would affect health at the end of the day. If we don't have transportation for people to move, if we don't have the right income, health will be affected. So from that point of view, we focused on these issues that it is bread and butter for us in public health, and packaged them in a way that's practical with certain recommendations and send them out. It didn't come from the ministry. The ministry would not have influence on this list that we have. And I don't know the connection between this list and the plans that you have, development plans.
Yeah, our Director of Planning may want to comment on that question.
Yeah, just further to that, so Gregory's Health Unit staff have been involved through the regulatory process right from day one. And again, their input into this and looking at it through a health and all policies lens has really led to some, what we hope are some really good policies around healthy communities. So if you go through the new official plan, there's a lot of references to healthy communities, healthy design, parks and open space, alternative transportation, transit, and looking at it through that health and all policies. So from chatting with Gregory's Health Services staff, my understanding is that Gregory's Health Services is a leader in this area in terms of being involved in official plan reviews and other things locally. It's not common throughout the province. I think there is more of a push to have health units involved in those documents, but no doubt Gregory's Health Unit has been a leader in that area for sure.
Thanks for that update.
If I may elaborate,
Yes.
I agree 100% with everything you said. It just, this last list of priority that we released last month was from our point of view. Yes, it's continuation to the work that has been done, but it is not from the ministry, and it was not have any hidden agenda to influence anything that the county is planning.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fossmer?
If I may, just to clarify, so is there actual written comments from, received from public health in relation to the OP?
There's no specific written comments, and the reason for that is because we meet on a regular basis with health unit staff, and as part of those meetings, they provide verbal suggestions and updates. So there's no formal comments that the health unit has provided, but no doubt they've been involved in some of the workshops that we held, some of the events that we've attended. So yeah, they've been alongside us, and in fact, they've been an excellent partner with this project, and as a result, like I said, you'll see a lot of policies in there that are directly influenced by input from the health unit staff.
Okay, I think that's fine, and that's a good answer. We're focusing on the minutes rather than a general discussion, so.
Kim.
Yes, Council.
If I can just add as a point of clarification for everyone around the table, when the Ministry of Municipal Affairs receives the official plan, part of their duty is to circulate through their one-window process to the partner ministries. This has been something that's been of long standing, at least 10 years, I think. Would that be correct, Randy? That they set up their one-window service. The Ministry of Health is not one of the ministries that's generally circulated through that one-window process. It's MNR, it's OMAFRA, it's those ministries that are part of that. So I think, kudos to Randy and his staff by making sure that they have built that connection with our local partner to ensure that we are getting the benefit of their input and their on-the-ground expertise, because that's just not something that the province does as a matter of course.
That's a good update. Okay, let's call that motion. All in favor of the motion? That motion is carried. Thank you very much for that. Okay, now we're going on to bylaws. We have two bylaws in front of us. I'll put them on the floor one at a time or all together? All together. Okay, bylaw 5031-18, a bylaw to acquire certain lands in the city of Owen Sound as described in Schedule A to develop a regional skills training, trades and innovation center. And 5033-18, a bylaw to authorize the warden and clerk to execute a revised agreement between the Corporation of the County of Grey and the Ministry of Education for 2018 Ontario transfer payment for childcare and family program services. Anybody going to speak to this or put it on the floor? Yes, put Councillor Burley, Councillor Eccles. Okay, discussion on those bylaws. Any discussion on those bylaws? Councillor Fosbrook?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So if I look at the first bylaw, there's a similar point to both of them. So the first bylaw, first page, states, the agreement referred to in Clause 1 is attached as Schedule B and forms part of the bylaw. But the agreement, in fact, is not labeled as Schedule B to the numbered bylaw. And then when I take a look at the second bylaw, it states the agreement referred to in Clause 1 forms part of the bylaw, but again, doesn't clarify that it is in fact Schedule A. So going back to the first bylaw, and I apologize, it states there is a Schedule A, and Schedule A is identified. So I just think from a housekeeping perspective, if the actual agreements could have headers that say it is Schedule X to this bylaw, that would be very nice.
The clerk concurs with your
Thank you.
your points, and that shall be done.
So we don't need a motion for that? Thank you, madam.
That's housekeeping. Tidy that up. Any other comments on any other of the, I think then that we will call the motion on those bylaws. All in favor of those bylaws? The motion is carried. Thank you for that. So next is good news and celebrations. Anybody want to bring forward any? Councillor Patterson is in charge of leading the way today on announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Hanover is very pleased to announce that we launched our first cultural plan on September 29th. We started with a cultural mapping exercise, included the Saugeen Artists street banners, an artifacts roadshow, and recognition signs for historic buildings in downtown. We also had the dedication of a new mural that incorporates elements from the previous mural and new ones that reflect our town today. And if you're downtown Hanover, it's beside our Heritage Square on the side of a building, 50 huge panels. You can't miss it. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. That's great. Councillor Ardell?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Tonight, the town of the Blue Mountains is hosting Weeding Out the Myths on marijuana, so I'm pleased to announce that. If anybody needs to come and learn, you can come over to our town hall. It's from 7 to 8:30. I think everybody should be a part of this in their own municipalities. And one thing I'm really proud of, yesterday we passed our comprehensive zoning bylaw, Randy, so we're really pleased because it's been a long journey and it was unanimous, so I'm very happy to report that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Barfoot has some celebrations.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. I have two things, actually. The first one is I wanted to congratulate the municipality of Southgate for the presentation they did for Norm Jack last week. I had the privilege of representing you, Mr. Warden, at it and present him with the county pin. For those that are not aware, Norm was involved in municipal politics for 43 years. When I look around the room, I'm thinking that's
That's a record.
the record. Great attendance, I understand, during the afternoon session, which was open to the public. The night session was by invitation, and accolades certainly went out to county staff for their involvement on getting information to them for the presentation. So just overall a job well done by the municipality and staff. I just wanted to congratulate you for that. That was my first item. Second item, I was successful this year at Pumpkin Fest for beating Mr. Walker, so the torch is back in Grey County. Now I leave it to the rest that we're taking over to keep that tradition going. So for future county councillors, let's keep it in Grey.
So you will be available for coaching?
You're giving lessons, right?
Give lessons, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure it's an art form. Yes, Councillor Ardell.
Thank you, that just reminded me. Councillor Bob Gamble, who's been on council in the town of Thornbury and then in the amalgamated town of the Blue Mountains, 41 years just behind Norm. He is retiring as well, and we had a little get-together, but not that big of a get-together, but we did have a park we have named after Bob Gamble in the town of Thornbury, so which is his hometown, and so we were really pleased to do that, and he was very pleased that he had contributed 41 years of his life to municipal politics, which is over my age, maybe.
Thank you to that. Anybody other celebrations that we need to recognize other than Councillor Klumpus has celebrated the scarecrows the last time. I drove by them last night. They're still standing on the hill there. So that was an important thing as well. Okay, so then that being said, we'll call for adjournment. Councillor Pringle, seconded by Councillor Barfoot. We'll take a 5-minute break before we move into the